Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 20th March 2019. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 10 is related to the World Press Freedom Index 2018. And this World Press Freedom Index has been used by the United States in flagging the curbs or the limitations on Indian media. So this report states that the Indian media is not functioning freely. Now why is this index in news? So you should note that the United Nations State Department submits a report which assesses the country's human rights reports for 2018. And these reports are submitted to the US Congress. And in this, the report which was related to India has highlighted the issue of freedom of expression of Indian media. And highlighting the lack of freedom in Indian media, this report of the US State Department has used the World Press Freedom Index. So that is why this index becomes important for us from exam point of view. And we should know which organization releases this Press Freedom Index or the World Press Freedom Index. So this will be an important part for us from preliminary examination point of view under the current events of national or international importance. Now previously, if you notice the questions, you will find that in the year 2014, 17 and 18, there were questions related to the important indices. For example, this question in 2017 was about the Global Gender Gap Index. And the question read, which of the following gives this index? So you should know the organization or the body which releases such important indices. Further, in the year 2018, the question was related to the Rule of Law Index. And here also it was asked as to which organization releases this Rule of Law Index. Further, in the year 2014, the question was related to the World Economic Outlook report. And the question again asked the organization which releases this report. So that is why such important indices and the organizations which release these indices are important for us from exam point of view. So let us understand which organization releases the World Press Freedom Index. So without getting into the details of this article, you should only know that the World Press Freedom Index is released by an international organization which is known as the Reporters Without Borders. And this index has been published by this body since 2002. Now it is important to note that why is this index so important? So it is important because this index is used by various international entities like the United Nations and World Bank, and also by various diplomats to highlight the freedom of press in various countries. So this index stands as a tool to compare the press freedom in various countries. So the organization which releases this World Press Freedom Index is important for us from preliminary examination point of view. And if you go through these previous year questions, the first question which was asked in 2017 read, which of the following gives the Global Gender Gap Index ranking to the countries of the world? So the correct answer here was the World Economic Forum. The question that was asked in 2018 read, Rule of Law Index is released by which of the following? So the correct answer here was World Justice Project. And regarding the World Economic Outlook, it is released by the International Monetary Fund. So similarly, a question can be asked regarding the World Press Freedom Index. And there will be a practice question at the end of this discussion. So you should try that. With this, let's move to the next article. Now this data point on page number 19 is related to the international patents which are filed by the Indian citizens with the World Intellectual Property Organization. And this data point highlights that there has been a spike in these patents which have been filed by the Indians in the year 2018. So as you can see in this trend in the graph, it shows that previously there was a downfall in the number of patents which were being filed by the Indians in the WIPO. However, the year 2018 has witnessed a sharp rise in these number of patents. And regarding the sectoral breakup, you should note that the pharmaceutical industry has registered the highest numbers of patents which are filed in the WIPO. Now the number of patents which are filed by any country reflects that that country is excelling in innovation. So here it is important to note that the WIPO or the World Intellectual Property Organization releases a report related to the innovations in a country. Now as discussed in the previous article, here also, let us take up the report which is released by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and that can be an important fact for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now regarding the World Intellectual Property Organization, you should note that it is a body or agency of the United Nations. So this becomes an important fact. Secondly, this agency is charged with protecting intellectual property through an international system that promotes and sustains creativity and innovation. In this line, the WIPO helps the governments, businesses, and society to realize the benefits of intellectual property. And also, it provides global services to protect the intellectual property across borders and to resolve various disputes related to the intellectual property between the countries. Now, here it needs to be highlighted that the World Intellectual Property Organization publishes the Global Innovation Index Report or the GII report. And this report is an annual ranking of countries by their capacity for and success in the area of innovation. So that is why this can be an important fact for us from preliminary examination point of view. Now here you can get confused with other similar reports which are published by other bodies. For example, the Global Competitiveness Report is published by World Economic Forum and the Indian Innovation Index is released by the Niti Aayog. So that is why you should keep in mind all these bodies and the reports or indices which are released by them. And this can also be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. As we have seen in the previous article, various questions have appeared in the preliminary examination related to the important indices and reports published by important international organizations. And at the end of today's discussion, there will be a practice question related to all these aspects. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 9 is related to the delimitation of constituencies in assembly elections and the Lok Sabha elections. And it is related to the election system of India. So this will form a part of the Indian polity in the preliminary examination syllabus. So here it is important to understand what is meant by the term delimitation, what are the constitutional articles which are related to this delimitation phenomena, and also what have been the history of delimitation commissions in India which have been created by various governments. Now, before understanding the phenomena of delimitation, let us understand how elections are conducted for Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. So, for the purpose of holding direct elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies, each state is divided into territorial constituencies. And we know that the elections within these territorial constituencies are conducted on the basis of first past the post system or the FPTP system. So the representation of people in the parliament is through the territorial constituencies. So for example, there are X number of people in a constituency. They are represented by one member of parliament in the Lok Sabha. So now the question arises as to how are these territorial constituencies created in India. So the first principle that is followed is that each state is allotted a number of seats in the Lok Sabha in such a manner that the ratio between that number and its population is the same for all states. And this provision does not apply to the states having a population of less than 6 millions. Now let's take the example of Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh in this context. And we all know that the Rajasthan has been allocated 25 Lok Sabha seats. And the state of Uttar Pradesh has been allocated 80 Lok Sabha seats. And let's say the population of Rajasthan is X and the population of UP is Y. So this principle states that the ratio of population of Rajasthan with that of the seats which have been allocated to Rajasthan will be the same for the ratio of population of UP with that of number of seats allocated to UP. And this will be same for all other states in India, which means that there is uniformity of representation in between different states. So this first principle is followed for allocation of number of Lok Sabha seats to a particular state. And for this, the principle that is followed states that the number of seats in the Lok Sabha will be allocated to a state in such a manner that the ratio between that number and its population is the same for all states, as we have seen in this example. And what this does is that it provides a uniformity of representation between different states. So this means that there is uniformity of representation between Rajasthan and between UP. Now, once the number of seats have been allocated to a state, now the question that comes up is how these constituencies will be created within a state. So, for example, if Rajasthan has been allocated 25 Lok Sabha seats, how these seats will be allocated or created within the state of Rajasthan. So, for that also, there is a principle which states that each state is divided into territorial constituencies in such a manner that the number of people represented by a MP remains the same throughout the state. Now, for example, in the state of Rajasthan, there are two constituencies that are A and B. and the member of parliament for the A constituency is this, and the member of parliament for the B constituency is this. So according to this principle, the number of people represented by this member of parliament who represents the constituency A will be the same as the number of people represented by this member of parliament who represents the constituency B, which means that there is uniformity of representation between different constituencies in the same state. So as we have seen in this example, there is uniformity of representation between different states and between different constituencies within a state. Now, as the constituencies in India are created on the basis of population, and this population figure is not constant and keeps on changing with every census, how are the territorial constituencies then divided or readjusted? So for that purpose, the delimitation has been provided in the Constitution of India. Now, as we have learned, the territorial constituencies in India are divided in such a manner that the proportion of representation for each constituency remains the same at the state level. Now, after the conduct of census, the population figures keep on changing in India. And that is why, after every census, a readjustment is to be made regarding the allocation of seats in Lok Sabha to the states and also about the division of each state into territorial constituencies. So this has to be done after every census because the parity in representation changes because of change in population. And we know that the change in population in different areas is at different rate. For example, in some areas the population growth is more, while in some areas it is not that high. So due to this variation in the growth rate in population, the uniformity of representation is affected. And that is why after every census, a readjustment has to be made in allocation of seats in Lok Sabha to the states and also the division of each state into territorial constituencies. So regarding this, the parliament is empowered to determine the authority and the manner in which this readjustment has to be done. And according to Article 82, the Parliament by law enacts a Delimitation Act after every census. And when this act comes into force, the central government constitutes a Delimitation Commission. And this Delimitation Commission is responsible for the readjustment of seats which are allocated to the states and also the reallocation of seats within the state. So after this, let us look at the historical manner in which the delimitation has taken place in India. Now, as the Article 82 has mandated that after every census, the Parliament has to pass the Delimitation Act, and according to that Act, a Delimitation Commission will be constituted. So accordingly, the Parliament has enacted the Delimitation Commissions Act in the year 1952, 1962, 1972 and in the year 2002. Now, post-independence until the year 1970s, India witnessed an unprecedented growth in its population. And this growth in population was uneven in nature because different constituencies in different parts of India had a different growth rate of population. Further, the population changed in these constituencies as a result of migration of people from one place to other or from rural areas to urban areas. And all these factors have led to uneven distribution of population in various constituencies of India. Further, the population had been increasing at a very high rate in some states. So that is why in the year 1976, by the 42nd Amendment Act or the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, the allocation of seats in Lok Sabha to the states was frozen so that the number of seats in Lok Sabha remain constant, which is currently at 543 seats. And this Amendment Act also froze the division of each state into territorial constituencies till the year 2000. And this was done at the 1971 census level. So the last commission that was created was 1972, and in this census, the number of seats which will be allocated to a particular state were frozen, and also the territorial constituencies within the states were also frozen. Now initially this ban was only till the year 2000. However, by the 84th Amendment Act of 2001 or the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2001, the ban on readjustment was extended for another 25 years till the year 2026. This means that the number of seats in the Lok Sabha cannot increase beyond 543 till the year 2026. And all this was done in order to encourage the population limiting measures. This is because if the seats in the Lok Sabha or the state legislative assemblies are allocated on the basis of population, some states will find it attractive to increase the population of those states so that the number of seats allocated to those states will be more. And that is why those states will have more representation in the Lok Sabha. For example, presently the Uttar Pradesh is the most populated state of India. And also, this state has the highest number of Lok Sabha seats, which is around 80 out of total 543 seats. Now, as Uttar Pradesh has 80 seats, the other states will find it attractive to increase the population or promote the increase in population so that they also get more allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha. And as such, their bargaining power in the politics increases. Now, although the 84th Constitution Amendment Act banned the allocation of seats to the states, this Amendment Act empowered the government to undertake readjustment and rationalization of the territorial constituencies in the states on the basis of population figures of 1991 census. Now, as we took the example of Rajasthan, and it has 25 Lok Sabha seats, and these 25 seats were allocated to Rajasthan on the basis of 1972 Delimitation Commission, which based this on the population census of 1971. So this Constitutional Amendment Act provided that the constituencies within the Rajasthan should be readjusted and rationalized, which means that the number of seats will not change. However, to bring out parity between different constituencies within a state, readjustment and rationalization can be done. And regarding this, as we have noted, the principle that is to be followed is the uniformity of representation between two territorial constituencies. And further, in the year 2003, the 87th Constitutional Amendment Act provided for the delimitation of constituencies on the basis of 2001 census and not on the basis of 1991 census. So basically, this Amendment Act also provided for readjustment and rationalization without increasing the number of seats allocated to the states. However, now this was to be done on the basis of 2001 census and not on the basis of 91 census. So this means that this act provided for the latest census to be used for rationalization and readjustments of territorial constituencies within a state. So till now we have understood that the principle which is followed in the allocation of territorial constituencies is the uniformity of representation between different states and between different constituencies within a state. And these allocation of territorial constituencies is done on the basis of census, which provides for the population of the country. However, as the population keeps on changing with every census, the seats have to be readjusted or the allocation has to be done again. And for this purpose, the Article 82 provides that Parliament should enact Delimitation Act, and through which a Delimitation Commission should be created, which will look after the allocation of seats in Lok Sabha to the states and also the division of each state into territorial constituencies. However, as the population of India is increasing, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act froze the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha to the states. And this was done on the basis of 1971 census. And this ban on the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha was further extended for another 25 years till 2026 by the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2001. However, this 84th Amendment Act provided that the seats within a state can be readjusted and rationalized. And this can be done without altering the allocation of number of seats to that state. And this 87th Amendment Act further provided that this readjustment and rationalization should be done on the basis of 2001 census and not on the basis of 1991 census. And this readjustment and rationalization has to be done without altering the number of seats allocated to each state. Now, one very important fact related to the Delimitation Commission is that the orders of this Delimitation Commission cannot be called in question before any court of law in India. So which means that the recommendation of this Delimitation Commission are binding and cannot be called in question in front of any court. Further, the orders of the Delimitation Commission are laid before the House of People and the State Legislative Assembly concerned. However, the Lok Sabha and the State Legislative Assembly cannot modify the recommendations of the Delimitation Commission. So this is another important fact for us from preliminary examination point of view. So these are few facts related to the process of delimitation regarding the seats of Lok Sabha. And at the end of this discussion, you will find a practice question related to these aspects. Now let us take up the next article. Now this article on page number 8 has been written by the CEO of the Niti Aayog. And in this, he has highlighted the importance of competitive federalism in improving the learning outcomes at the micro and macro units of administration. In this line, he has highlighted a case study from Haryana, which is related to a competition which has been started amongst the administrative blocks in Haryana and is known as the Saksham Initiative. Further, he has highlighted the index which has been created by Niti Aayog and is known as School Education Quality Index, and how it is leading to improved outcomes in the field of education by the implementation of the principle of competitive federalism. He has further highlighted the aspirational district program and its key features, and how this program is also feeding the competitive federalism feeling and how it is leading to improved outcomes. Now, this can form a part of the General Studies Paper 1 as well as General Studies Paper 2, as it touches the aspects of competitive federalism. However, in the year 2018, a question was asked in the mains examination in the GS Paper 1. And this was related to the topic developmental issues. And this question was related to the aspirational district program in India. So let us try to understand the details which have been highlighted by this article. Now, regarding the educational reforms, the article highlights that the education department across the country has the largest share of employees, including teachers and other staff. And despite this highest number of employees, the learning outcomes have been poor in our country. So for a comprehensive educational reform, the article highlights that all stakeholder participation becomes essential. And in this line, the editorial has highlighted that the states are unable to invoke all stakeholders in their educational reform process and hence are not so successful in achieving the desired learning outcomes. Now, for comprehensive stakeholder participation, the article has highlighted that states are not a viable option, and this has to be done at the administrative block level. And that is why the educational reform process is required at the administrative block level in order to achieve the desired learning outcomes. And in this line, the author has highlighted the case study of Haryana, which is known as the Saksham Initiative. Now, in this Saksham Initiative, an administrative block is declared as a Saksham administrative block if it has 80% or more students which have been declared as the grade level competent. Now, what this grade level competent means is that if a student is in 5th class, has he achieved that educational status or not? So now, by this Saksham Initiative, it has helped in improving the teacher training and internal assessments at the block levels in the state. And the blocks or the administrative blocks have been taken as a unit for assessment of the learning outcomes in a state. And in this Saksham campaign, the state officials nominate their block for the Saksham Ghoshana. And this can only be done once they are reasonably confident that their respective blocks have achieved the target of 80% grade level competency for their students. Now, once a block has been nominated by the state officials, there is a rigorous round of third-party assessment regarding the claims of that block. So, for example, if a block is nominated for the Saksham Ghoshana and the officials think that this administrative block has achieved the target of 80%, there will be a third-party assessment of this claim of that administrative block. And if by this third-party assessment, this block is found to be Saksham, the block officials will be recognized by the Chief Minister in a public function. So which means that it aims at incentivizing and also appreciating the learning outcomes achieved by an administrative block. And if all the blocks in the districts are declared as Saksham, the entire district is accorded a Saksham status. So now how this project Saksham helps in improving the learning outcomes in a district. So regarding this, the article has highlighted that it helps in inducing competition among the administrative units. And this competition helps by the way of recognizing the efforts which is made by the officials in an administrative unit by recognizing the outcomes in the field of education. Secondly, such kind of competition helps in improving the participation of different stakeholders in order to achieve the intended outcomes. For example, if the administrative unit has to be declared as a Saksham administrative unit under this project, all the stakeholders, for example, the administration, the teachers, the training staff, and the students will have to come together in order to improve the ranking of that administrative unit. Thirdly, the competition also makes abstract goals such as learning outcomes more real by defining the exact actionable matrices on which improvement is desired. And for this, you should note that the Niti Aayog has come out with an index which is known as SEQI, or the School Education Quality Index. Now, as we all know that it is very difficult to measure the learning outcomes in real terms. So that is why an actionable matrix has to be defined so that the goals can be compared for different districts or the administrative blocks. And that is why such kind of competition helps in defining exact actionable matrices for achieving desired improvement. And finally, such campaigns also help in shifting the mindset of the state education administrators. This is because they will now take proactive steps to ensure that their administrative units secure a better position on such desired actionable matrices like the SEQI index. Further, this article states that the Niti Aayog has always promoted competitive federalism, and this competitive federalism has been based on fixed matrices on which the states are compared. And due to this competition between the states, it puts pressure on the policymakers across the states to perform better on the predefined goals and matrices. So, in order to translate the competitive federalism at the state level in the field of education, the Niti Aayog has come out with an index which is known as the School Education Quality Index. So, here it is important to note that this index functions at the state level. Now, regarding this index, you should note that it has been divided into two categories. First are the outcomes, and the second aspect is related to governance and management. And within the outcomes, the first is related to the learning outcomes and the quality of education in these states. Second is related to the access outcome as to how accessible is the education to all sections of society. And third is related to the equity of outcomes, which means that does the education, for example, if the education outcomes are evenly spread across gender, for example, are these educational initiatives benefiting the women or not? And also the poor sections of the society. The second aspect of this index is related to governance and management in the field of education. And this includes the governance process and the structural reforms that have been taken by the state in order to improve the outcomes of education. So now, what are the benefits of creating such an index which provides scores for different states? So by calculating such an index, it provides insight into a state or a union territory's strengths and weaknesses, and areas which require more focused action and resources. So this means that it overall analyzes the situation of a state and how the allocation and training has to be done in that state or the union territory. It also seeks to encourage a positive competition and to propel the states and union territories to innovate to improve the outcomes. And for example, Haryana has come up with a Saksham project, and that is an innovation in this field to improve the outcomes, so that the overall outcome of the state of Haryana can be improved. Further, this index aims at shifting the policy focus to educational outcomes rather than inputs and the programs alone. So for example, you might be knowing that the previous approaches of the governments have been to increase the allocation in the education sector. And also, there have been many schemes related to the improvement in education. So moving from the inputs and the programs approach, this approach aims at improving the educational outcomes. Secondly, it aims at encouraging state-led innovation in cost-effective policy approaches to improve the outcomes. So it also aims at a cost-effective policy approach. And finally, it aims at facilitating and sharing of best practices across states and union territories. For example, the benefits of the Saksham project can be shared with other states and union territories as well. And this can help in improving the educational outcomes in those states. Now, after highlighting the administrative block level initiative Saksham of Haryana and the School Education Quality Index, which is operated at the state levels, the author has also highlighted the Aspirational District Program, which operates at the district level. And regarding this program, you should note that it aims at expeditiously improving the socio-economic status of 100 selected districts from across 28 states. And according to this program, the districts will be ranked on their incremental progress through a ranking which is known as Delta ranking. Further, Niti Aayog has entered into partnership with Tata Trusts, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations to assist the districts in enumerating improvement in key performance indicators through a household survey. So this is the approach through which the Niti Aayog aims to improve the socio-economic outcomes of the districts or selected 117 districts. Now, the three important principles of the aspirational district program include the convergence of the central and state level schemes. So, this basically aims at a targeted approach, which means that previously there were multiple schemes that were operating related to one field. However, now this program aims at converging all these schemes which are targeted at one section or in one field. For example, it will aim at converging all the schemes of the center and the state which are related to education. Secondly, it aims at collaboration among the citizens and the functionaries of the central and state governments. So, this means that it also aims at involving the citizen participation. And finally, it aims at competition among the districts. As we have seen previously, various indices have been created by the Niti Aayog in inculcating this feeling of competitive federalism. However, in this program, this competition will now be at the district level. Further, this program focuses on 5 main themes, and they will have a direct impact on the quality of life and economic productivity of the citizens. And these 5 themes include the health and nutrition, education, agriculture and water resources, financial inclusion and skill development, and also basic infrastructure. So these 5 indicators will be tested in these districts, and all the approaches under the aspirational district program will be targeted towards these themes. So in concluding the importance and the lessons that have been learned in the implementation of various programs by the Niti Aayog, the author has highlighted that there is a constant focus on recognizing and disseminating the best practices of important districts to other states. And this process acts as a reward for well-performing local administrators and also provides impetus to other districts to adopt measures which have resulted in improvements in the previous districts. Secondly, the strategy of competitive federalism has shown success in various districts which were earlier ranked low in the baseline surveys. Thirdly, the political participation ensures the participation of all stakeholders in the projects, and this effectively ensures the administrative efficiency. For example, by facilitating the Saksham administrative districts by the CM of Haryana, the political participation is also ensured, and this further increases and ensures the administrative efficiency in those administrative blocks. Further, the political participation also helps in improving the quality of service delivery to the people. It has also been highlighted that states therefore need to induce competition and give a boost to put all the key actors in education in their driver's seat to improve the learning levels. So as we have seen in the SECU indicator and the Saksham project, the focus now has to be on education and all stakeholders will have to participate. And finally, the author has concluded that improvement in learning outcomes is essential and also an immediate goal for the India. And this will also help India in playing a greater role in global economy by exploiting the demographic dividend. And finally, the author has highlighted that competitive federalism is a key towards attaining goals of systemic transformation. And for this, the participation by all stakeholders is a must. So after going through this discussion, you should try this question from your mains examination point of view. With this, let's move to the next article. Now in this article on page number 9, the author has argued that how the various moves by the government have eliminated the Gram Sabhas from the decision-making process in forest affairs. And this is also damaging democracy at the forest or the tribal level. So this is an important part for us from General Studies paper 1 under the topic social empowerment. Now regarding the details of Forest Rights Act, you can go through the Daily News Simplified of 11th February 2019 and also the 3rd March 2019. And in this, various issues which are important for us from preliminary examination point of view related to the Forest Rights Act have been discussed. In this article, we'll only take up the issue which has been highlighted by the author. So in this regard, the author has highlighted that after the formulation of the Forest Rights Act 2006, a regulation was passed by the Ministry of Environment and Forest in the year 2009. And this regulation mandated that the consent of Gram Sabha will be necessary for all forest diversion proposals and compensatory schemes. And they will be an essential part of the settlement of rights under the Forest Right Act. So this regulation of the Ministry of Environment and Forest empowered the Gram Sabha and provided it with powers of necessary consultation and consent regarding the diversion of forest lands from their control. And also, they had to be consulted in almost all settlement rights under the Forest Rights Act. Now, this move was important because it for the first time created a space for communities to participate in decision making which involved diversion proposals for the land. And that is why the empowerment of Gram Sabha made the forest governance more accountable and ecologically informed. However, the way in which this provision of the Forest Rights Act has been implemented has raised many questions. For example, the case of a project by the Odisha Mining Corporation. And in this, the Gram Sabha resolutions of the 7 villages which allowed for the diversion of forest lands were absolutely identical, and that is why they were fake as well. So in this case, what happened is that the Odisha Mining Corporation got the consent of all the 7 villages, and the language of those consultation papers or the resolutions were very similar in nature. And as they were identical, they were absolutely fake. And by doing this, effectively, the Odisha Mining Corporation, which were favored or supported by the officials, created resolutions which led to the diversion of forest lands from the control of villagers. And that is why such a flawed implementation has led to the falsification of this informed consent by the Gram Sabhas under the Forest Rights Act. So in this regard, the author has concluded by saying that the forest diversion by the government is inevitable because such rules are not properly implemented or effectively implemented. And further, recently, an order has been passed by the Ministry of Environment Forest in the month of February, which has written to all the states that the Forest Rights Act compliance is not needed for in principle approval for the diversion of forest land. So this rule or communication of Ministry of Environment and Forest has diverted the powers of Gram Sabha regarding the consent which is required for diversion of forest lands. And this can be used in writing answers related to the wrong or faulty implementations of the provision of consent by the Gram Sabha in case of diversion of forest lands. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now, after going through today's discussion, let us take up these practice questions from our preliminary examination point of view. The answer for these questions will be displayed after 5 seconds. Now, the first question reads, consider the following pairs related to innovation reports and organizations. So, in this line, the first reads the International Intellectual Property Index, and the body which is releasing it is the World Intellectual Property Organization. Now, this is an incorrect match because the World Intellectual Property Organization releases the Global Innovation Index. The second is also incorrectly matched as the Global Innovation Index is not released by Global Innovation Policy Center. However, the third pair, which reads that the Global Competitiveness Report and the World Economic Forum is correct. So the correct answer is C, that is 3 only. The second question reads, consider the following statement related to World Press Freedom Index. The first statement reads, this index is compiled and published by an NGO called as the Reporters Without Borders. This is correct. The second statement reads, it takes into account the freedom enjoyed by journalists and the quality of journalism in a country. Now, this statement is incorrect because it only takes into account the freedom enjoyed by the journalists and not the quality of journalism in a country. So, the correct answer that comes out is A, that is 1 only. Further, you should also try these 2 questions from your preliminary examination point of view. Answer for these questions will be displayed after 5 seconds. So, the first question reads, with reference to the Delimitation Commission, consider the following statements. And this question has appeared in the 2012 preliminary examination of UPSC. The first statement reads, the orders of the Delimitation Commission cannot be challenged in a court of law. Now, this statement is correct as we have read in today's discussion. The second statement reads, when the orders of the Delimitation Commission are laid before the Lok Sabha or State Legislative Assembly, they cannot effect any modification in the orders. This statement is also correct. Hence, the correct answer that comes out is C. That is both 1 and 2 are correct. The second question reads, which of the following is correct about the Forest Rights Act 2006? The first is that it deals with tribals only. Now, this is incorrect because it deals with tribals as well as other forest dwellers. The second statement reads, it provides for ownership rights of new lands inside the forest. This is also incorrect because it aims at establishing and providing the historical or traditional rights to the communities. The third statement reads, Gram Sabha recommends whose rights will be recognized by the Forest Rights Act. So this is a correct statement. Hence, the correct answer is C. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now, let's move on to the question for the day.